art historians, welcome to the first of 16 videos covering later Europe and the Americas. And so what we're looking at starting with is our first video, which is going to encompass 18th century British art and also an art form called Rococo. So this is video 1 of 16 videos of late Europe and the Americas. So here we go. So when we're looking at 18th century British, so that's clearly the 1700s. You remember when we do centuries, we just subtract one. Okay, so 18th century British, here's a British piece from 1743 called the Tete a Tete from a series called Marriage a la Mode. Your artist here is William Hogarth, and he's British, clearly. And it's oil on canvas, 28 by 36, so a little over 2 feet by 3 feet. And what's interesting about this is this is, one of a group of 6 paintings by Hogarth that are satire. And so satire is when you make fun of something but to point out its flaws, right? And so this is highly, highly satirical, and its purpose is to make fun of the aristocracy. Tete-a-tete is like to talk. Okay, we had a tete-a-tete, we talked. And marriage a la mode means of the day, right? So marriage of the day. Okay, and so what you're looking at is Hogarth's way of analyzing contemporary marriage in 18th century England. And what you're looking at is the idea of how the aristocracy has changed. And what I mean by that is, at this time period, it used to be that people would marry only within their same social class. During this time period, that kind of goes out the window. And why is that? Well, the reason for that is what ends up happening is a lot of the aristocracy is losing their money. A lot of the reasons that they were rich and the way that they became rich was sort of going away. And the middle class was growing into not just a middle class, but a new wealthy class. And so what ended up happening with marriage of the day, marriage a la mode, is that people would marry outside their usual social circles for particular reasons. And so what you have here is a woman who is an aristocrat. She is titled. That means that she's like lady whatever or countess whatever, right? But her family, we begin to understand looking at this, has no money. And so what ended up happening is in these marriages where women had a title but men didn't, families would often marry their daughters off in order to get money for the family. So she has a title. She is lady whatever. And she marries this guy, right? He's got money, but he wants to be in the circle with all of the people that are lady this or duke that, right? By marrying her, sorry guys, it's Monday morning where I'm recording. By marrying her, he gets a title and she gets the money, right? So it's a marriage of convenience. And there are a lot of things in here to sort of help us understand exactly what this relationship is. So we're looking really at a relationship that, as I said, is simply for convenience. He wants to be able to move in the circles with people who are wealthy. And she wants, or he is wealthy. He wants to be able to move in the circles of the nobility. She is from a family that's not doing so well financially, and they want more money for their family. And so that is what we're looking at. So we're going to go to an expanded version of this. We can see it a little better. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Hogarth. So when we're looking at this, we need to think about the fact that art used to be just for the aristocrats and the royalty and the rich and the kings and the church. But now people in the middle class and the growing new wealth, and it's really becomes a thing where they call them the nouveau rich, the new rich. And in England, then and even now, there is almost a separation between what they call old money and new money. Which is really unfortunate. So what Hogarth is doing here is he makes these pieces, these 6 pieces, as a way to mock the problems with the aristocracy and mock the way that they treat people who are coming into this new money. And what's really cool about this is he usually, Hogarth, the painter, was usually a printmaker, right? Like Rembrandt or Albrecht Dürer, Lucas Cranach. He made prints, right? Well, he makes this set of 6 paintings, and they're so popular that he makes them into prints, and they make him a lot of money, which is really cool. And they become a little more popular because they're shown to other people and they're shared with other people. And so this idea of what he's trying to accomplish here with the mocking of the aristocrats really becomes even more possible because he does put them into print form. So what are we looking at? All right, let's examine. We got a few things going on. We got her, okay? She's got the money. I'm sorry, she has the title, but she doesn't have any money. And we're looking at her, and she looks a little askew. She looks like things are not quite right. What do I mean by that? Let's back up some. Hold on, let me grab the mouse. We see that her bodice is undone, right? These laces should be super tight, and they're not, okay? And we see that she has a rosy, glowing face, and she looks very satisfied with herself. And what has just happened is she has just been cheating on her husband. How do we know that? Well, we're going to look at the overturned chair here and the music and the violin. She has had a violin teacher, air quotes, violin teacher, here to teach her the violin, right? But he really hasn't been teaching her the violin. He is her lover, right? So why? Because this is, remember, marriage a la mode. This is a marriage of the day, right? And they're married to each other for convenience, not for love. So when we take a closer look at him, he's also a little bit disheveled here. We see the dog here, which is the sign of fidelity. Remember, the dogs are always the sign of fidelity. The dog is pulling a bonnet, a woman's bonnet, out of his pocket. He has been with another woman. Oh no. We see that his sword is broken here on the ground, which indicates he has been in a fight. And it's possible that he has been in a fight with possibly the husband of the woman that he was sleeping with. Okay. So it's all very, very tawdry. It's very naughty. And you can see that, he's had a heck of a night out on the town, right? So then we look at some of our other people. Let's scroll to some of our other characters. All right. So we see this guy here and this guy back here. So let's focus in on him. This is their, oh my goodness, look at all those bills. This is their accountant, their steward, right? And he has got this stack of bills, and he has says ledger. So he has their accounts, and he is just so frustrated because they're spending way too much money. That's all the things that we see here. These are bills that have come due. They're spending way too much money. She is sleeping around. He is out gambling. And he's just had a terrible, a terrible evening. You know, he's just really not doing well. And when we see back here, we also see, look at the details. Look at all these little statues. Look at all of these giant pictures. They're trying to look rich, right? He has all the money, right? And he wants to look rich. But what you see is he is not doing it well. Right? So there's just too much stuff there. It's tacky. I'm going to zoom in on our little guy here. Here's their attendant who is waking up, hasn't cleared the table from the night before. Things are still a mess. The chair's all out of whack. It's his job to have the house in order. It's clearly not in order. So she's not running a good household. He's not running a good household. The only one in the household who seems to know what's going on is the accountant, and he's so angry at both of them for not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And it's just a disaster of a marriage, right? So, the accountant is looking at them like, get it together, people. What are you doing? But they're not getting it together because she is happy that she has money now. Right? Because she's an aristocrat and hasn't had money. So she's happy that she has money. He's out, drinking and womanizing and gambling. So he's happy that he can hang out with the wealthy, but he's getting himself in trouble too. And so it's just Hogarth's way of commenting on sort of the dysfunctionality of the marriages that are happening there. And what's awesome is we come off of this piece and we come to this piece, the philosopher giving a lecture on the orrery. And it's amazing the contrast between these two images. The first image, marriage a la mode, tete-a-tete, is just, passing judgment on the frivolity of the situation. This piece by Joseph Wright of Derby is very much about, coming into the age of the Enlightenment. We're talking about, the idea of imperial observation that is grounded in science. We're talking about the moral of this picture being the pursuit of scientific knowledge. And how can I say all of that? Because Joseph Wright of Derby, your author there, he was really sort of what they call the unofficial artist of the Enlightenment. Many of his paintings were about scientific studies, about trying to learn more about humans and about the world and the universe. And so all of this idea of scientific discovery, the Enlightenment, and that the Enlightenment is that time where we are trying to learn as much as we can about everything. And the Enlightenment impacts not just your scientists and your inventors, but also artists and writers. Frankenstein, the idea of like reanimating flesh, comes out at this time. That doesn't come out at this time, but is influenced by this time. This concept of wanting to learn about science. And so what you see here, what is an orrery? That's that word. It's very hard to say. Orrery is a mechanical model of the solar system. And what you're looking at is this philosopher, a thinker, who's looking over and explaining how the solar system works. And our paintings are moving away from religion and into things that are more scientific, more societally based, more about what goes on in the world, and not so much about our religious beliefs. And so it's a really excellent image here. I'm going to scroll up one so that you can see your main character here, your philosopher. He's this great gray-haired lecturer. He's explaining and he's clarifying, and he's based on Sir Isaac Newton. He's meant to look a little bit like Sir Isaac Newton. And we have this man here who is young and has his ink in this hand and is dipping his quill into the ink, and he's taking notes and he's writing down all of these amazing things that are are being said by this wonderful philosopher. And so when we come back to it, and he's very young, and here's this older, wiser man giving him the tips. So when we come back to the larger piece, a couple of things should come to you. One, hopefully this should remind you of the calling of St. Matthew, because when we're looking at this piece, it is incredibly similar to the calling of St. Matthew on a bunch of different levels. Remember that contrast between light and dark is called chiaroscuro, but the extreme contrast between light and dark, like this, is called tenebrism. Well, Joseph Wright was a huge fan of Caravaggio, and so he uses the Caravaggio tenebrism here. This piece, like a lot of the things that Caravaggio painted, is that moment of epiphany, that moment of transformation, that moment of understanding. And here, instead of that moment of understanding being religious, here in this piece with Joseph Wright of Derby and the philosopher and the orrery, the model of the solar system, that moment of understanding is an understanding of science. And so we don't see idealized figures here. We see an old man and a young man. We see children. And here's this really, really young man staring, and here's someone with their back to us, and another probably child with their back to us. And so you see these people. This young man is shielding his eyes so that he can stare into into the solar system model. This composition is based on what was actually a real society called the Lunar Society. And it was a monthly meeting that happened in England, I think in London, where they would get together and discuss current events in science. And so that's what we're meant to think here. And a lot of times we lose this little boy over here. Okay, so there's all these figures looking at the model of the solar system and the orbits of the planets. And inside, that light that we see shining up at us is indicative of the sun, right? So it's this really cool moment where that light source is a gas lamp that's in there, and it is shining to represent the sun, but it's also shining to represent the light of knowledge. These are people who are becoming enlightened. The enlightenment. I mean, it's a thing, guys. And so, what we see here are this idea of knowledge being passed from the older generation to the younger generation. But I want you also to think about one other thing. We're looking at a model of the solar system. And in looking at the model of the solar system, I want you to look at the faces of the people, and you see their expressions, right? We see curiosity, contemplation, wonder, awe, right? But I also want you to look at the lighting on their faces and think about it like a moon. That is full. That is half. That is a new moon where it's completely dark. That is half the other way. Believe this is called waxing. No, this is waxing and this is waning. Waxing is coming into being brighter and waning is coming into being darker. So this is your waxing moon, your full moon, your waning moon, and your new moon. Here's a crescent moon, right? So the thoughts that go into the creation of this, it's not accidental. Nothing here is an accident. And it's awesome. And we begin to see painters paint what's going on in the world as opposed to just what's going on in the church. And it's going to be cool. We're going to see a lot of really cool stuff. All right, here we go. So we're moving on from, knowledge, use of light and dark. Awesome. So we're moving on to what is a time period in art called Rococo. And when we're dealing with Rococo, we're dealing with a very pastel palette, lots of pinks, lots of light colors, light greens, light pinks, light blues, lots of sfumato. Remember that word? That's where it looks sort of like atmospheric and sort of fuzzy. Lots of sfumato, SFMAT, spu. I'm going to have to write it down. Hold on. Here we go. SFUMATO. I'm one of those people that can't spell it unless I'm looking at it. So we're seeing a lot of that sfumato where it's sort of like a little bit fuzzy in the distance, sometimes even a little fuzzy in the beginning. And Rococo, when you're dealing with Rococo, the most important thing to remember with Rococo is it is literally right before the French Revolution, well, like by a few years. And so Rococo is really just the absolute pre-revolutionary sense of entitlement of the aristocrats. It is absolutely about the aristocracy being completely corrupt. It is about the monarchy just forgetting about the poor. We're dealing with people starving, people dying in the streets. The aristocracy doesn't care. Like, it's awful, right? Like, there's such a division between wealth and poverty in France at this time that it is unbelievable. Rococo is almost completely French. And so let's look at what is probably the most famous Rococo painting of all time. This is called The Swing, and it's by Fragonard. The D is silent, Fragonard. And it's Jean-Honoré Fragonard, or Honoré, I'm sorry, Jean-Honoré Fragonard. We see this oil and canvas. It's not huge, 2 feet 8 by 2 feet. It's not that giant. But it is, look at this palette. We've got pinks, we've got soft greens, we've got soft blues, we've got the sfumato in the background. Everything is light and airy. And this really is the carefree days of the aristocracy before literally it all comes crashing down and most of the aristocrats are beheaded, right? So this is indulgence. This is folly. They're being silly and having fun. So what's going on here? Well, you have to kind of look at your composition. You got to look at your main players. So let's look at our main lady here in the center. Okay. So here she is. She's on a swing. It's a nice, beautiful red velvet swing with lovely ropes. And her skirt is blown up back behind her. And in front of her, you can see her stockings, and she's kicking off her shoe. Okay, so she is in this beautiful pink dress, lovely red velvet seat, lots of frilly white petticoats, and she's on this swing just up and back and forth, and she's having a good time. And you see the little angel statues underneath staring up at her, literally looking up her dress. And you see her shoe coming off, and you see all of these beautiful lush trees with fruit on them and flowers on them because they're ripe and everything is beautiful and wonderful, right? Okay, we're going to scroll and take in a couple of other places because I'm hoping you notice this hat and this hand. Because what we're seeing down here is this man lying on the ground. She is looking down at him. Now you can look down. You can see that she is looking down at him. He is looking up at her and up her skirt. Thank you very much. While she's kicking her shoe off. My goodness. And you can see statues in the background of a nude Venus. Okay, so, we have some love statues going on there. And there's all this abundance of flower and abundance of spring and beauty. And you have this man this older man that she has tricked into pushing the swing for her. Now, this older man cannot see the young man because he is hiding behind all these bushes. And the older man is being nice and pushing her, but the putti, the angels, the little angels, they see what's going on. They're watching. right? And this dog, which is usually the dog is usually the symbol of fidelity, right? The faithfulness. He's barking at her, and he's trying to let this older man know, dude, you are being taken advantage of. There's someone there, but he seems unaware. He doesn't seem to understand what's happening there, and it's awesome because you see all of these cute little statues paying attention to what is happening. And he seems so oblivious. Look at this statue right here that literally has its finger up to its mouth going, shh, like it's trying to shush the dog, right? So here we see there's a fence in the background. So we can tell that there's some kind of, there's a house off here in the distance. You can see it ever so slightly. When you zoom in, there's like little pieces of the house back behind. So there's a house off in the distance. She is, here's more of the garden back here. So she's up in her swing. Her lover is here. She's tricked this man into to pushing the swing for her. And all of the angels notice what's going on, and the dog. But he is completely unaware. And so she looks mischievous. She's naughty. He is clearly in love with her. And this is, this is just that, I don't know how else to say it other than it is that pre-revolutionary, overindulgent, too much. It's just simply too much with the aristocracy. And so this is, as I said, probably the most famous Rococo painting of all time. And then that leads us to, your theme here, landscape, clearly, courtly life, the aristocrats, wealth. That leads us to the next piece, which is actually a self-portrait by what is considered to be probably one of the most important Rococo painters of the French court. So what you're looking at is a self-portrait by Elizabeth Louise Vigée-Lebrun. And so she was the court painter to the French nobility. And between what happens here and what happens here, the French Revolution happens in 1789. Okay. And so what we're dealing with is this piece that you're looking at is after, the storming of the Bastille in 1789. We're dealing with a time period where we're really thinking about France is now, what do I want to say? France is now basically at this point in control, being controlled by the rebellion, right? So he was married to Marie Antoinette, Louis the XVI, the King of France. Louis the XVI he was married to Marie Antoinette. She was a princess who married into the French nobility and married the Prince of France. And so when the prince became the king, she became queen. And they spent a lot of money. They spent a lot of money. And so what we see here is a picture of Elizabeth Louise Vigée-Lebrun after the uprising in 1789. Now, Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette were arrested, I think, in 1790, 1791, and then they were executed in 1792. But they were held, imprisoned for quite some time. So here's the deal of what we're looking at. Elizabeth Louise Vigée-Lebrun was, as I said, the court painter. She painted a lot of European nobility, but particularly she became rich and famous for painting the French court and Marie Antoinette. And they are close friends. And so what you see here is, look how stylized this is. It's very soft. It's got that, haziness to it, that sfumato, that atmospheric perspective. Lebrun she was famous for painting herself. She painted like 40 self-portraits. So she was inspired by both Rubens and Rembrandt. And this is a really good example of Rococo portraiture. But what's interesting is that what we see is a portrait of her, but also a second portrait. So it should remind us a little bit of Las Meninas, and that there's more than one thing going on here. Because while Lebrun has painted herself, and she has painted an idealized version of herself, clearly, I mean, she is just absolutely stunningly beautiful in this picture. The picture that she's painting here is a portrait of Marie Antoinette. And why this is important is that in 1790, late 1789, early 1790, she fled France because she was the court painter to the aristocracy, and bad things were happening. And so she flees France to save herself. Unfortunately, her good friend and her, the person who, her patron, her commissioner, the one who gives her all her work, was arrested. And when Lebrun flees France, she goes to Rome. And so she paints this painting of Marie Antoinette as a tribute to her, because at the time that she paints this piece, Marie Antoinette is imprisoned, and then she's later executed in 1792. But this piece of Marie Antoinette is done from memory, and so, like I said, it's not a memorial portrait because Marie Antoinette's not dead yet, but it is a tribute to Marie Antoinette. She is thinking of her friend and queen, who is imprisoned at the hands of the revolutionaries. And so it's quite a beautiful piece, and it's very sad that Lebrun leaves France, and I don't think she ever returned. And her friend, and she does become close friends with the queen. Her friend is executed, as are her friend's children, which is really just horrible. But so that is our study of 18th century British and French Rococo. I will see you again next time for our next video. I hope you learned something today, and I'll see you again soon. Bye, guys.